Okay. So, welcome everyone to the second day of Feast of Tabernacles. Today's message is going to be about Satan building his beast system. I've covered this a number of times in the past, but now that most of the people who listen in regularly know a bit more about each subject, it might make a little more sense when I break it down again. Nothing is meant to be negative in any manner. I'm just going to be talking about the things that we need to know so that we can navigate through them and we can come out on the other end stronger. Now, Satan is assembling his beast system right now before our eyes, and I'll start with a little backstory on myself. I became interested in technology and programming back in the mid-'80s, and a few years later God ended up knocking me upside my head, and then after I ended up virtually dumping everything that I had been taught about the Bible while I was growing up, because 99.9% of the churches out there are teaching either watered down messages or just flat out garbage. So I started over from scratch, and that's when David J. showed me that, or that's when God showed me that he was really trying to, what he was really trying to say to his creation. So I dove deeper into the, to learn and understand the uncompromised Word of God. And then in early 2009, God moved David J. Smith to call me into the ministry and begin speaking to God's people. So my background in technology and programming make it easy for me to see and understand that Satan is using modern mantic science and technology practices to advance his agenda. If you find that you're having any difficulties while you're listening to this, don't get discouraged, don't lose track. Continue to listen, and mainly focus on the weapons and the target, not necessarily understanding how. I'm just explaining in a little more granular detail in some topics, but just try to understand the weapons that are being used against us. So the better we understand any of these topics, it's easier to become, to identify Satan's tactics. And eventually the pieces of the puzzle that will start clicking in your mind, you'll be able to connect bigger pieces. And once those start coming together, you'll really start seeing reality come into view. And you may find that at that point that you need to reassess some of your perceptions of reality. So we must know the tactics and weapons of our enemy, or we will have no way of defending ourselves. We won't know what hit us. There's a book that was written back in the 5th century by a man named Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu was a Chinese general who traditionally was credited as the author of the book, The Art of War. That is an influential work of military strategy. This book has been required reading for all high-ranking U.S. military personnel for decades. So the main strategy he expresses in his book is know your enemy. The better you know the enemy, the better you can defend against their attacks. So if you're not aware of the tactics and weapons used against you, then there's no way to recognize when you're under attack. So you're just sitting there, a sitting duck. So what are some of the tactics and weapons that our adversary, the devil, has been building since iniquity was found in him? He did not start yesterday. He didn't just start in the past couple of years. He's been building it, and more of it, the bigger it gets, the more of it that's being exposed. But if you don't put each of the pieces of the massive puzzle together, you may not see exactly where they're going, and that's what our intention is here. So keep in mind that Satan didn't just start his attack on mankind. He's been relentlessly plotting and planning his destruction of God's creation for thousands of years at this point. And that's all of God's creation. He's polluting the water, the air, the land, the crops, the livestock, every aspect of God's creation. And it's not just mankind, which of course was made in God's own image. Now, we don't have time here to go in depth on each of these aspects during this Feast of Tabernacles, so I'm going to quickly cover some of the building blocks on how the beast system is being constructed. The beast system is not going to just pop up on the scene of the end times, not without it first being built. And it is currently under construction. That's my intention to show you here. The way that they're building this beast system is very subtle. But when you know what you're looking for and what you're looking at, it stands out plain as day. So first, they're going to need a database to store all the information. And I mean all the information. And that's why they're building the blockchain. That's going to manage the information. They also built huge storage facilities where they store fields and fields of information in their warehouses. Then they need a way to organize the information. Once they grab it, they need to massage it and figure out what they can use it for, and that's where the Sentient World Simulator comes into effect. And then they need to gather the information. That's where they do farming, they'll do the surveys, whatever you're doing on your phone, when you're swiping, when you're answering, what is Facebook? Some of the things they'll say, you get up in the morning and the first thing that you drink is your last gangster name or something like that. And all these little things that you play, you're feeding their Sentient World Simulator. You're feeding their node of you, their avatar of you in a digital form, so they can better define you. And so, what is the blockchain? The blockchain is a database used by the cryptocurrency protocol, and it is deemed a decentralized ledger running on a peer-to-peer network that captures and stores all transactions. And that term decentralized means that it's not under anyone's personal control. I beg to differ. So as the term peer-to-peer network, in its simplest form, it's just a network in which two or more computers share files and access to the devices such as printers, without requiring a separate server. So computer or server software. Now the peer comes from the Latin word par, which means equal. So when you're on par with someone, you're on their peer. So in networking, it's just these devices on the same level. Not unlike the cloud where people store their data and they can get it from any device, but it's the same concept. Now when the term is used for blockchain, a peer is a computer, also known as a client, or a server. And a server is just another computer, it just has a particular job that it does. It serves the information, but it's just a computer. And in a very simple but broad view, think of it as the client is the computer, that would be the worker. And then the server would be the supervisor or manager. That's kind of how it is. But they're still, the worker and the supervisor are both people. They just have different roles. Well, the server and the client are both computers. They just have different roles. So don't place anything too complicated. So each piece of data is a transaction, and it is considered a block. To put it another way, each block in the blockchain contains a piece of information. So each block is linked to the previous block. It has to have that relationship, and then each block is linked to the next block. All blocks are linked to the next block, each block forming that block chain. It's a chain of blocks, a chain of information. So when a new block is created, it has an identity, a hash, to identify it from the previous block. And that's what these miners are trying to prove to make their cryptocurrency, or to be rewarded in their cryptocurrency type of fiat money. So the hash is just an encrypted code, and in the blockchain, this hash code is unique to the previous code. So once a block is created, the block is never deleted. The blockchain just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And if the information in that block is changed, it will have been changed in a block down the chain, reflecting the new information of the block. So basically, the blockchain is a database ledger that each entity or node in the system shares. So using the blockchain technology, participants can confirm transactions without the need for a central certifying authority. There are a multitude of potential users for the application of the blockchain, and of course more and more each day. But it would include, but not limited to, buying and selling, even surveys, which I consider voting a survey. The blockchain can be used to track any and all transactions, and every transaction is permanently recorded on the blockchain. It is never deleted. It might be changed, but like I said, that change will be reflected in a block down the chain. A transaction is any exchange of information. Any. Therefore, a transaction occurs anytime a communication is made from anyone. You're listening to this message, that's a transaction. You, even watching it later, you're still conducting a transaction. And that would be considered by the blockchain as a transaction. That would be anytime you make a phone call, anytime you do a text, all of that is transactions to a blockchain, and then is recorded. So, what's considered a node? In a distributed system such as the cryptocurrency protocol, nodes are peers. In the world of digital currency, a computer used for cryptocurrency mining is considered a node, as well as the individual who's using the computer, and anyone buying and selling or trading cryptocurrency. Each one is considered a node. That's how the computer just terms an individual, one unit. They call it a node. So in short, an entity accesses the blockchain database. It's considered a node, and a peer and a node are the same thing. The terms are interchangeable when you're speaking about the blockchain. So, digital cryptocurrency is being promoted at the public level as an alleged new form of currency used for conducting financial transactions. But we're going to look at things from God's perspective, from His point of view, because He sees the entire picture. We're still only seeing small parts of a large puzzle, but God sees the whole thing. He created it. So those are those who are trying to control the masses, the ones who consider themselves the elite. They don't want anyone to perform critical thinking, which I covered in a message way back in 2009 called Think for Yourself. They don't want anyone to look at the man behind the curtain, and this is what I refer to as the Oz syndrome, because they don't want anyone to see reality. They prefer to direct everyone's focus on the image that they have created, that they're in the smoke that they're blowing. So we're going to step back a bit to see a more complete picture. We'll find that when we think that for ourselves and investigate these topics at a deeper level, we'll be able to put more of the pieces of the puzzle together and to form larger chunks for an overall larger picture as well. And of course, at the same time, we'll be connecting some of the other larger chunks to the point where we can see Satan's plan of attack and the tools that he's using to accomplish his goal. So we'll be able to see how the blockchain is the fundamental groundwork for building out the beast system. And as we exercise the analysis of world news in the light of Bible prophecy, we'll be able to identify how they're playing their cards to force blockchain technology into the game, and how the system will entrap everyone. Bitcoin is the first fully digital cryptocurrency that apparently beats the hackers, and blockchain is the software that makes it work. But Bitcoin is only the precursor to their Liberty One World cryptocurrency system, which they started. They've been changing the name of it, but it's still coming from the Liberty Foundation, Concordance Foundation. Paper fiat money will be worthless, and we will only be able to buy and sell as long as we're using their form of digital fiat currency. And eventually, in order to gain access to their Concordance world digital currency, you're going to have to be required to have an identifying mark. And with the massive push for these mandatory injections, which I'm sure will resurface again in what they term will be the next pandemic. It looks like they're going to be introducing an invisible quantum dot microneedle array tattoo patch that will inject their antidote. So, trying not to get the bots to kill this broadcast, because these what these dots do, these microneedle array patches, is they have needles. They're dissolvable needles on the end. The tips of the needle stay in you. It's the tip that has the luciferase dye from a snail in the ocean, is where they get that luciferase. That will be the identifying mark, which you won't see unless you have an ultra red light, which can be used from your mobile device. Anyway, with the masses push for these mandatory injections, they were showing everyone how inconvenient that is. And so these microneedle array patches can be mailed to you through Amazon, UPS. You can be able to pick them up at your drugstore. They don't require the 60 or 70 below degrees that like the Pfizer remedy had required, or the stuff would go bad. And this is, it deters the people who think that they're, are using the excuse they're afraid of needles or whatever. These aren't needles. It'll feel like Velcro, but you will have induced the mark. It whether it's the one spoken of in Revelations at the time or not, I don't know, but it will be a mark and it will be used to buy and sell. This DNA process that they're using permanently alters your human DNA, and maybe another piece of the puzzle that they're moving into position. If you don't have the invisible tattoo as proof of your injection, your identifying mark, then you'll not be able to conduct business outside of your home. That's in the beginning. Now in Revelation 13, we'll read chapter 13, verse 16. And it says, "And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." So, how did these two technologies come about? Well, they want us to believe that these new technologies, this Bitcoin and this blockchain, mysteriously popped onto the scene October 31st, 2008, immediately after the financial crisis. Yes, it was on Halloween that blockchain was introduced to the world by the entity using the pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto, at which time the first Bitcoin transaction was initiated as the first block in the blockchain in what has been labeled as the Genesis block. It's another imitation of Satan from God's world. And now that they want us to believe that Bitcoin came into existence after that Halloween of 2008. However, that was when it actually made its debut in the world stage, where it had was introduced to the masses. But as you're about to see, Bitcoin appears to have been in the making for quite some time now. There is a magazine. It is a Rothschild publication from January 1988, and it's titled The Economist. You can look this up online. I don't have the image with me right now. The cover shows a picture of a phoenix, and it's rising out of a pile of burning money. And if you look closer at it, it reveals that the money that's being burned are various currencies from around the world. And then around the neck of the phoenix is a gold medallion. And the gold medallion is not just a typical gold coin. When you look at it, you'll see that the gold coin is a symbol of that of the cryptocurrency coin. And that was back in 1988. So this has been in the planning for quite some time. They just brought it onto the scene. They've been building it. Once it was ready for the stage, they presented it. Now, further examination reveals that the date on the coin, and this was, remember, this picture was in 2008, but the year on the coin was 2018, which is about when they started bringing these things onto the scene. So remember that the published date of the magazine is January 2018. That's over 35 years ago. And here's a quote from the featured article title there. The title of it is "Get Ready for the Phoenix Source," and the article is January 9, 1988. Quote, 30 years from now, Americans, Japanese, Europeans, and people in many other rich countries and some relatively poor ones will probably be paying for their shopping with the same currency. Prices will be quoted not in dollars, yen, or D-marks, but in, let's say, the Phoenix. The Phoenix will be favored by companies and shoppers because it will be more convenient than today's national currencies, which by then will seem a quaint cause of much disruption to economic life in the last 20th century. I'm still quoting. In the beginning of 1988, this appears an outlandish prediction. Proposals for eventual monetary union proliferated 5 and 10 years ago, but they hardly envisioned the setbacks of 1987. Unquote. So the article mentions the setbacks of 1987, which was the worldwide sudden, severe, and largely unexpected stock market crash on October 19th, 1987, labeled as Black Monday. So, as you can see, neither Bitcoin nor blockchain suddenly popped onto the scene out of nowhere. They have been under construction for over 35 years. So you should be able to discern that the entire structure and functionality of both are by design, and keep in mind, they've been building them. So the more they can build them, the faster they can build the next year and the next year. So to date, no one has identified this Satoshi Nakamoto, or what this pretentious entity actually is, which it identifies by a pseudonym, a presumed pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto. And this alone should be raising red flags and suspicion to everybody. And though we don't know who this Satoshi guy is, what he did was an economic revolution. Whether he's an entity or a group of people, whatever, nobody knows. Nobody's been able to identify him. So that economic revolution, of course, is the Bitcoin, and it's the Bitcoin that gave life to the blockchain. The blockchain could not exist without a constant feed of large amounts of information. So the blockchain is a Piccioli ledger. Maestro Luca Piccioli, better known as Luca Piccioli, he's often called the father of double entry bookkeeping, but he didn't invent it. The double entry system, known in its day as bookkeeping a la Veneziana, or in the Venetian style, was being used 2 centuries earlier, around the 1300th century. Now, however, blockchain is a ledger that is not based on trust. It is a trustless ledger. Despite everything that you read or hear about the blockchain, it's simply a ledger. It's a permanent record of everything. It's just not. They've taken it off of paper, which is what ledgers originated. But unlike this Piccioli ledger, this double entry ledger, it's declared that blockchain requires no trust whatsoever at all, because the blockchain does it. What it does is replaces trust with mathematics. And so you don't have to trust the banks, you don't have to trust the Federal Reserve. All you have to trust is the mathematical proof. So this Satoshi Nakamoto entity was the first one to make that mathematical proof work, or whatever that entity is that they named that. So greed was the method that was used to get the world to start adopting the system of literally giving people money, this digital currency called Bitcoin, in exchange for building the blockchain system, with the promise of a new version of the digital currency that can be instantly transferred to from one individual to another without having the involvement of the banking system. So this produced the very first people's money online. Now I refer you to Luke chapter 12, verse 15. I'm going to be reading from the NIV version. What's going to be displayed on the screen is the King James Version. But Luke 12:15 says, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." So that's what they're feeding on. They were feeding these miners, is what they call them, people at home with their own computers and their own storage hard drives. That's what they used for free labor to build the initial beast system, the blockchain system, because these miners were doing their Bitcoin mining to prove the blocks, and for each one that they were the first ones to prove, they are granted a monetary compensation through Bitcoin. That was their driving force to make them continue doing it. Well, once they got so big, now they have their own systems in place, and the miners aren't really making that much money. But anyway, that's why it's not. We need to watch out for the greed factor, because Satan is trying to use greed and selfishness to advance his program here. So the blockchain is utilizing the fact that it's open source, and they're promoting it as being accessible to everyone. Now, on the surface, it looks like a very transparent platform, but because all the transactions can be viewed by anyone. But what they don't mention is that one can only view a transaction to the level of authority that they are granted, that's been granted to that individual. So there is at least a couple of groups. There's a small group who develop and implement the blockchain, who possess a far more granular form of that access than the average user, which means that those in this higher form of access have the ability to use it and to abuse it. They can go in and tweak it. We don't have that power. But they try to simulate, look, you have full view of this. So unlike our current centralized banking system, with this blockchain technology, that are investing the power and the control of our economy into far fewer hands than it is currently, with this artificial intelligence being promoted as being the solution to eliminate any flaws introduced into the system by means of having humans in control. So we must be aware and quite wary. Hang on, I need water. About any claims about the blockchain not requiring any trust and claiming to be infallible. Needed that. Because this system, which is promoted as being infallible, actually requires the highest form of trust. And you think about it, because it requires absolute trust. And we all know how well that worked, for the Titanic. They're all selling the blockchain system of commerce for the financial transactions of the world, along with promises to help the unbanked and the unregistered millions in the world. They're claiming that this will help all these people that don't have enough money for a bank, and that's because they're going to provide people with their monthly allotment of increments on the blockchain. They're touting that the blockchain is as being a transparent and secure decentralized system, and what they fail to mention is the encryption system used for the security is centralized. So it's not a truly fully decentralized system at all. They promote this as it is, and what they're saying is true, but they're not telling you to look further into the security system. And they don't mention it when that they're going to control the money of the world. And of course, when they control that, they control the world. And the blockchain, by design, is not intended to be restricted to the control of only monetary transactions. It's designed to control everything and everyone down to your personal biometric identity. So encrypting the blockchain, so the blockchain is cryptographically secured by the cryptographic hash function, the CHF, and that's just a hash, is a mathematical algorithm that maps data of arbitrary size. It's just a fixed size, often called the message, and it converts it to a fixed size, and that's your hash. It's just a shorthand code. Think of it in that fashion. It'd be like a QR code. That's a hash, but that one's in a design. A hash is alphanumeric. And it's a one-way function. That is that the function is, which is practically infeasible to invert. So invert basically means to crack the code. The hashing systems are comprised of a public key and a private key. So the private key is kept by the owner of the information. If the owner of the information wants someone else to have access to a piece of that data, they give them a public key, which only opens up some of that information. Whereas, just think of it as the master key and that the janitor has or the custodian of the apartment complex. You have a key to your room. The janitor has a key to everybody's room, a master key. And the algorithm that generates the hash code from the blockchain was created by the National Security Agency, the NSA. Surprise! Some might find security in the fact, they might actually find security in that when you tell them that the NSA created the encryption hashing system, but others know. Years ago, the early quantum computers demonstrated the ability to crack that code. This was years ago. I will be getting into that in another message of how that part of the system is growing. Anyway, public key infrastructure, the PKI, is used to manage the identity and security in internet communications. PKI is a public key cryptography encryption mechanism. So it would have a public and a private key. This is based on the use of two related keys, public and private, pairing these two cryptographic keys together to encrypt and decrypt messages is also known as asymmetric cryptography. If you code a message using a person's private key, you can only decode it using the matching public key. Okay, that's what I was just explaining. The public and the private keys are not physical keys, but rather they're a very large prime number. They're large prime numbers that are mathematically related to one another. And as a side note, it is that type of key that they're looking for to unlock the gate, the abyss. It is not going to be a dangly gold key on a chain. It is going to be a numerical key, an alphanumeric type of hash key. And I already covered that part. I was talking about the keys on the floor of an apartment. Maybe I passed that part of the note. So you don't share your private key with anyone. If you have this information, you don't share your private key. Like I said, if you want someone to know something, you give them a public key, a lesser key of authority of access to what you can see. Didn't mean to get that deep. So you don't share your private key with anyone, and that matching public key will be issued to the receiver. So when you send some information encrypted with your private key, only the one who's on the receiving end who possesses that public key will be able to decrypt the information back. That happens during a phone call. Your phone call is transformed from analog, you speaking, into a digital form, ones and zeros. It shoots across the telephone line to the other end, and then it is recrypted back from digital to your analog, and it reproduces that sound. So without getting too far off track, right there, the entire world is speaking the same language. Every transaction gets converted to ones and zeros. Ones and zeros are the only thing a computer understands. That's it. Is there a 1 there? No, then it's a 0. That's all a computer understands. Now you talk to it in different languages, and compilers convert it to digital so the computer can understand it, and then it converts it back onto your screen into something the human can understand. So anyway, didn't mean to get off too far on that either, because that's coming up in another message. So anyway, this protects the identities and the data from unauthorized use of access. It is with this hashing system that they're selling the masses a false sense of security. Now, I mentioned the sentient world simulation. The blockchain foundation and the architecture is driven by artificial intelligence programming. Excuse me, need a drink. Keeping in mind that the name itself tells you the type of intelligence. It is artificial. It tells you right there in its name, artificial intelligence. It's not real. It is a counterfeit intelligence. Don't forget that. That's artificial intelligence has been around for many decades, but it went through a few periods of reduced funding and interest, mainly because it quickly outgrew the conventional computing, so it stalled out. And at that point, it went through many years of what's termed the AI winter. There were two major winters from 1974 to 1980, and then from 1987 to 1993, where computing or AI kind of stalled out for a while because the general computers were not fast enough to handle it. So it wasn't until quantum computers were developed and produced where AI would be able to receive adequate interest and funding to continue its growth. With artificial intelligence programming running on the quantum computers, they now have the power and the capability to build this blockchain architecture. With conventional computers, they could only build so far. So the sentient world simulation functions through artificial intelligence, and it feeds the blockchain. With each piece of information creating a block. So the sentient world simulation project, it's known as the SWS, and it's based on the SEAS technology, SEAS. So Purdue University's synthetic environment for analysis and simulations, that's SEAS, synthetic environment for analysis and simulations, SEAS. And that's what's currently being used by Homeland Security and the U.S. Defense Department to simulate crises in the United States mainland here. And I have links to articles, but we'll cover those later. The Sentient World Simulation is a project that was introduced in 2006 at Purdue University. In the following year, 2007, the building out of the project was initiated. According to its creator, the aim of the Sentient World Simulation is to be a continuously running, continually updated mirror model of the real world that can be used to predict and evaluate future events and courses of action, unquote. Which means each and every person and thing on the planet is represented as a node in the computer simulation of this SWS. You have a digital copy of you functioning under the control of the US government. And everything that everyone does on a computer, a handheld, a wearable device, is fed, even those fits, is feeding information to the blockchain, and it is analyzed and evaluated at the most minute levels by the SWS. What day you went out for your jog, how far you jogged, what time it was, the temperature, where you were, everything is absorbed for that instance, or each of those instances, each step you take. You are feeding your avatar that they have created of you. You're giving them the ability to fine-tune you better. Every move you make on your telephone, every survey you answer, everything that you purchase, when you purchase, anything you purchase on your card is traceable. They have the whole list of everything you bought. The comments you make on your Facebook and stuff, how you react to other comments, the games that you play, the actions and your reactions during the game, the programs you watch, the music you listen to, where you travel in your vehicles, what day and what time you do these things. And now through contact tracing, which they initiated when they were throwing out these injections, they know who you were with at the time that you're making all these, recording all these blocks on the blockchain. Anytime you're at a store, they know you're with this friend because your coordinates is right there, right next to each other. And it's logged, the time, everything. So the more information you give them, the more they're able to fine-tune you. What they don't know about you, they will generalize what they do know, find the people that have that same exact pattern, and then from a handful of those, make a judgment as to what you would most likely be like and fine-tune it as they go. So all the information that they gather in this SWS that's associated with you is linked to the artificial simulated avatar of you. And the more information you feed that avatar, the more accurately they can predict your every thought and every move. They know that you go to the store every Sunday morning about 9 o'clock and you buy a Hershey's candy bar and a soda. You don't realize you do that. Or anytime you just have a tiff with your significant other, they know that because you've been texting, and that goes back and forth. Well, now you always go to that bar and buy that drink. You don't realize it as much as they do. They even have websites. There's a project PAI. And there's many other ones that are designed specifically to encourage their members to build their own personal avatar. It's their friend. Some of these videos I see, these people think that their avatar that they fed all this information to is their best friend. Anyway, counterfeit of the human brain. The neurons in the human brain have specialized projections called dendrites and axons. Dendrites being information, or they bring the information to the cell body, the soma. And the axons take information away from the cell body. Okay? You don't need to learn all that. Just get that general idea. So the information from one neuron flows to another neuron across the synapses. It's just a little roadway. The synapses contains a small gap separating neurons. So you need they don't really connect. You need a bridge, and that bridge is the electronic pulse that goes across. So communication between the neurons to occur, this electric pulse must travel down the axon to the synaptic terminal to jump across. This is how your brain works. This is how it functions. So the dendrites, which is in Greek means tree, are branched protoplasmic extensions of a nerve cell that propagate the electrochemical stimulation received from the other neural cells to the cell body, or the soma. So that's where the neuron, from which the dendrites project. The dendritic aberration, also known as dendritic branching, is a multi-step biological process by which neurons form new dendrite trees. They're growing, and and branches, and they create new synapses. This ability for the dendritic growth plays a significant role in learning and memory formation for the human. It just keeps expanding. So you look at that, the blockchain as the cell body, the soma. The blockchain utilizes a multitude of technologies as dendrites to bring it information. Saying the miners are sending them information. We're feeding Facebook and surfing the web, and that we're feeding it information. We're building out the brain system of the beast system. So they bring in all this information from all these different avenues. The main ones in the foundational build-out were Bitcoin and gaming, but they've moved on. Whereas this is where they fed man's selfishness and greed to get that instant gratification, and it worked. So these people were, the gaming industry is ridiculous. So in 1998, a study showed that the video games raised the level of dopamine in the brain to about 100%, which is roughly the same increase triggered by sex. And that study was like over 25 years ago. So today's games have evolved a bit since that point, from what they had available back then. With the fast-paced Bitcoin mining and the addictive adrenaline-pumping gaming industry, the blockchain skyrocketed, and the build of Satan's counterfeit of the human brain. So you factor in the various social media platforms, with each forming new blocks to exponentiate the dendritic growth, thereby stimulating this astronomical increase in the AI's IQ, which is stored in the blockchain ledger, or memory banks that are up in the cloud. And a cloud does not mean a fluffy moisture product in the sky. A cloud is just a huge plot of land with a huge warehouse on it that's filled with basically a hard drive to store information. That's all it is. So these are just a few of the technologies that in AI's blockchain system used to produce blocks as the counterfeit neurons connecting the digital dendritic trees and branches in all the asymmetric fashion to simulate the ones found in the human brain. With each transaction on the blockchain increasing the number of the artificial neurons and dendrites and axons, and it's thereby augmenting the artificial intelligence level of Satan's blockchain beast system. So, and when we analyze this blockchain beast system, its structure and the way that it grows, it's easy to identify this as Satan's attempt to counterfeit the brain that God created in man. Because Satan's trying to create his version of everything that God does, but we have to recognize it as a counterfeit. So always keep in mind that Satan cannot create anything material. He can only modify and manipulate and mutilate things which God has already created. If you look at it that way, you can see man has not created anything. They claim to create things, but in reality, it's the same as Satan. They're not creating anything. They're using what's been created and manipulating it. And we've addressed two of the major tools in Satan's arsenal as the modern mantic science and the technology practices. So with these tools, he's able to manufacture various weapons to use against God's creation in an attempt to assume control and exercise authority over mankind. And here's one of my, one of the favorite techniques that Satan uses, fueling the fire to provoke fear and selfish greed. So, coupled with convenience as a framework for gaining and guiding man's thoughts and actions. I get talking too fast here. I'm drying up. So this framework is that he's doing is guiding man's thoughts and actions into contention that leads to the manufactured solutions, which can only be introduced once those being manipulated take a side that will advance their predetermined agenda. And this is known as the controlled opposition. Crisis management, the Hegelian dialect, problem, reaction, solution. So today we can see many of the pieces of the beast system that are being put together. They're put in position at warp speed. They're picking up speed using a very sinister technique. Just a couple of years ago alone, you have seen that Satan flexed his muscles just in the short past there. He demonstrated the control that he has over mankind. He told the entire world to go hide in your house, lock the door, and don't come out. The boogeyman's outside. And an extremely high percentage of the world's population did just that, and they sat there waiting for their keeper of the cage to open the door. When it wasn't locked, they could have walked out any time. So each one of these pieces of puzzle are being introduced through the controlled opposition process. By doing it by promoting their current, we'll say, disease. So that's the problem that they created. Then they generate a panic and fear. That's the reaction they want. So the public will now demand a solution. And their solution was this mandatory injection. In early 2020, we heard President Trump stating that they're manufacturing millions of disposable injectable needles and that they will have the military help to administer the injections. That's the problem they created. This is an intentional tactic because they know that this will create pandemonium with the majority of the population over just the needles themselves. Then you couple in the administration of the military for the added effect in order to outrage a larger group of people. So that's the reaction they want. And this makes their solution more palatable and acceptable, at which point they will introduce this Band-Aid-like invisible medical tattoo, this microneedle array patch method to administer their injections. That's their solution. So this strategy gives the masses the illusion that they are the ones that are in control of making their own decisions. They don't realize they're being led to make that decision. But without exercising critical thinking and without thinking for themselves, they'll be led to believe that they only have two choices, not realizing they have a third choice. No, thank you. You don't have to say yes or no. Just go, no, thank you. I don't want those options. It's just like, you have to choose Republican or Democrat. Well, that's all I have to choose from. You only have two teams on the field. Choose one. They give you the simulation that you have a choice, but they're only saying you can only choose from that. Anyway, but their SWS exercises have already shown that shown them how to turn the masses against those who have the ability to think for themselves. And as we've all witnessed, they got the world to mandate these injections. The fear generated by this current disease that we just experienced allows the media to promote, and the hyped up fear of paper money and coins spreading the disease. If you'll recall, some of the stores weren't using some money. I went into we'll just say a convenience store, and I purchased something with cash, and they handed me a receipt. I said, what is this? They go, that's your change. We don't have any change. I go, oh, well, I do. Give me back that one of those dollars, and I gave them the correct change. I go, now you got change. Then, when you factor in the fact that nobody's talking about this, but all of a sudden, the change came back. Where was it? Where did it go? How did it come back? Nobody talked about it. Anyway, but they were trying to make money like it would carry all these diseases and scare people. That was the problem they created. So they're trying to get people to demand that no one uses paper money anymore. It's too dirty, it transmits diseases, and that's the reaction that they want. So they're going to be promoting that again with a little more aggression next time. This makes it easy to introduce the cash to society worldwide. Just use plastic cards or your smartphones to digitally transfer money. That's step one of their solution. Then they were forcing businesses to close. People were losing their jobs. They couldn't pay their debts. And this was causing the economies of nations worldwide to implode, not just here in the United States. And that's the problem, again, that they created. People in business around the world are demanding assistance to pay their bills. Well, that's the reaction they wanted. That's where they'll have the introduction to their solution, the Great Reset. Although the specific details of the Great Reset will not be rolled out until the World Economic Forum meets again. Don't they meet in January, I think? Anyway, so each time they meet, they're planning closer to their Great Reset. So as well as similar technology and references to a global economic reset of debt, their Jubilee, where they will wipe the debt clean. Everybody's debt will be, this is how they're going to impose it in a fashion such as this. They're going to wipe everybody's debt clean worldwide. You have no more debt, starting over from scratch. And this is where they will introduce, started out as, Concordance started out as the Libra coin, or with the Libra coin, and people call it the Facebook coin because Facebook endorsed it. They later changed it to Diem cryptocurrency, but now you're starting to see, what's that, ODBC? Yeah. CBDC. There you go. Thank you, Paul. But they're trying to bring in a cryptocurrency that's acceptable, and so you're seeing it sneaking its way in, and that's step 2 of their solution. So you should be able to see how each of these pieces is being formed, and that they will use them once these pieces of puzzle are put together. It's going to expose a large piece of the puzzle for you. And now with the heightened level of fear and with that last disease we just went through, and they were able to impose a contact tracing. So they're building that system in the meantime to perfect it. It's easy to see how in Matthew chapter 10, verse 21, how this would be possible. And the brother shall deliver up the brother to death, and the father the child, and the children shall raise up against their parents and cause them to be put to death. So all you have to do, you can see how they're doing it. People were pushing their parents or siblings to go get these injections, and they would have, with the this system that they have in place, the contact tracers, people can easily turn people in unanimously. All you have to do with these people on unemployment is to offer them positions in contact tracing, which they've already started doing. And people will be turning in strangers, friends, relatives, due to fear and, of course, greed, that monetary gain. The delivering up to death part of that verse is not going to happen right away, but through gradualism, Satan is getting everything in place, creating a problem that evokes the reaction, which is satisfied by this predetermined solution. So I realize we've covered several topics in this message, and some of you may not completely understand some of the technical terms. And this is why I'm trying to break it down, the terminology, with the hopes that you'll be able to grasp the concepts. Because the better we understand these things, the easier it is to communicate the topics to others. So as we cover these topics, the more clearly you'll be able to see a bigger picture and begin to strengthen your ability to connect even more pieces of the puzzle. So don't think that any of this is over your head. You'll be able to grasp these topics, read articles, do some research, prove all things. Exercise 1 Thessalonians 5:21. Sit down in prayer and ask God for understanding. Believe me, He'll provide you far more understanding than you can imagine. And so in the end times, knowledge will increase. And just look at how knowledge is. It's at hyper speed right now, and it's picking up momentum rapidly. But Fear not. God is not going to allow Satan to outsmart his creation. Whether mankind, as believers or non-believers, realize it or not, they're counting on someone to save mankind, and man's modern science technology practices will not be able to accomplish that feat. It can only be accomplished through our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, it says, "For God has not taken us, or has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind." So right there, that verse tells us that God is not the one that is giving the spirit of fear. So if someone's trying to make you fearful, if you all of a sudden you start feeling fearful, it's not from God. All this fear that's generated is from Satan. And we're told that in that verse that God has given us the spirit of power, the spirit of love, and the spirit of a sound mind. A sound mind means the ability to critically think for ourselves, not to be lulled into complacency by their bread and circus deceptions. They're constantly, you have football games on, and go get drunk while you're watching football. And here, have dollar menu. I can't call it food, but anyway, it's bread and circus. Just feed them and keep them entertained, fat, and preoccupied. This information is not intended to produce fear. The stuff that we're preaching from here, Adam and I, it's not to produce any fear. It is to shine the light of Bible prophecy on events happening today around the world. As God continues to open our eyes to reality, it may at times seem overwhelming, but keep the stuff in your head. Your brain will be working on it in the background. Do more research on your own. Keep in mind, God has no intention of leaving us here to fend for ourselves. We're told that God will help his people through all these things that are approaching and are just on the horizon. In Isaiah chapter 41, read verse 13. It says, "For I, the Lord your God, will hold your right hand, saying unto you, Fear not, I will help you." He's holding our right hand. And he's telling you, fear not. He's not the one inducing the fear. So we should not be falling for Satan's fear tactics. Now we're in the future. God doesn't want us to fall for Satan's trickery and deceit. He's revealing Satan's plans and strategies of deception. To know these things are coming and to actually see how Satan has seduced mankind into believing the same lie from the Garden of Eden, "Thou shalt not surely die." That was the one they were using during that pandemic thing they did. It was make people think they have to be afraid of death and then tell them they don't have to die if they do what they say. That man can produce immortality. They're trying to say that man can produce immortality through this DNA manipulation. And man doesn't need God. He can do it alone, without God. They want people to believe that God and Jesus Christ are sitting up there in heaven, and they're going, "Oh, snap. Did you see what Satan did? I didn't see that one coming. I don't know what we're going to do about that." No, they didn't get one over on God. Satan can only do what God allows him to do. God has already put on this earth ways to defend against these poisons that Satan is putting in the air, the water, the crops, the cattle, the livestock, everything. But they're trying to make man think that God can't help you. But look, the created has figured it out. Here's your answer. So when you connect these pieces of the puzzle together and you see that they're all pointing to the events that were written in the Bible a couple of thousand years ago, before the technology to bring them all into fruition was even conceived by man, that alone should excite us to know that this is it. This is what mankind has been waiting for since our fall in the Garden of Eden. This should be exciting times. Yes, it's pretty daunting how far Satan has gotten his claws in, and we should be joyful and thankful that we can see it now. And the more we know, the least likely we are to be entrapped by it, because it is very cunning. God has given us free will. He hasn't been forcing us to make any decisions. He's showing and telling us through his word why we might want to make the right decision. God's preparing us because it's coming to a point in the near future when Satan's going to be going to force the world to make a decision. Satan's going to be forcing this decision, and depending on your knowledge of his weapons is whether you're going to which direction you're going to make that decision. Satan's going to force that, and that Satan's going to induce a sense of urgency so that the masses will think that they need to hurry to make this decision, so they bypass critical thinking and they make a snap judgment. It's going to the intention is to force them to make the decision, which will then at that point be feeding off of their cognitive dissonance, and it'll be fueled by the coercion and fear and their greed. And these are not God's methods. They are Satan's tactics. Remember, Satan, his Antichrist beast system surfaces just before the return of Jesus Christ. The book of Revelation can be boiled down to one question. Who are you going to trust? Man under the subjugation of Satan, or Jesus Christ and God, our Creator? Thank you for listening, and we will have a